Welcome to another episode of The Dissection. There was a showdown in Parliament today in the Communications Committee. The various members of the various political parties which sit on the committee were not entertaining the idea of a change in regulations which would create a loophole for Starlink to operate in South Africa. As you know, the richest man in South Africa was begging for Starlink to come and save South Africa, for Starlink to come and solve the crime problem. He said, if only we could have Starlink at every police station, Mr. Trump, then we would see a situation where crime in South Africa would go down. So a few days later, in fact, 1 or 2 days later, the Minister of Communications issued a policy directive, changed regulations in order to try to make that happen. Parliament was not having it. They said, please, can you come and explain to us what you are trying to do? And the minister said, I'm happy to come through. And this is what led to the showdown today. The members of the committee did not hold back. I've summarized their responses and views so that you don't have to watch the full committee sitting because it was quite a bit of time that they took. But before I show you the summary, I want to look and talk about some of what the minister said. The minister was adamant, Solima Lads, that this is something that he's been working on since late last year and that this was not about everything that we all saw happening in the White House. He said something very interesting, which I think undercut the credibility of his argument. I'm going to play you that particular thing. But let's address this idea that he started in October, that I started this process in September, October, because he's using that argument as proof that it's not about Starlink, it's about just him expanding access to internet. This is something I don't buy, and I don't buy it for this reason. Starlink is being used in South Africa already by many people, illegally, but they're using it. So how are they doing this? They register under roaming in different countries. So you can get it in Lesotho, you can get it in Botswana, I think you can get it in Zambia, other parts, Zimbabwe as well. So people are buying Starlink and then they register under roaming, right? Under roaming, you can still access those satellites. You can still access that internet. And then you have to periodically go back to the registration country so that it continues your service. So it's already being used and it's popular in a variety of places like farms, etc. So the calls for Starlink to be operational in South Africa are not from May. They're not even from January. Elon Musk has been trying to get Starlink in South Africa for a while. He was participating in the application process in terms of Starlink, was participating in the process up until January when they withdrew. And I think they withdrew because Elon was like, I'm done with this. I'm going to use my tactics now. I'm going to squeeze these guys until they open it up for me without me giving up any ownership or allowing for black ownership in the South African space. So that's the first thing. So the calls for it to be operational were raised even during the elections early last year. This is not something that started in May of 2025. And any argument to that effect, for me, I don't find it to be credible. Just saying, look, it's not about what happened in the White House. I did this in October. And because I did it in October, it's not about Starlink. No, Starlink is being used. People have been calling for this already. So you simply saying no, October disproves the narrative that it's about Starlink. I don't find that to be genuine. The minister also said something that about transformation. He said that he supports transformation and BEE. I couldn't believe it. Coming from a DA minister saying that you support these things, transformation. I read the DA manifesto. Anyway, this is what the minister said. You listen to the minister. Tell me if you're not surprised to hear. This is a minister from the Democratic Alliance of John Steenhuisen and Helen Zille, the meritocracy guys. Listen to what he had to say.
Chair, I want to underpin this point, which is important and has been diluted in some of the conversation around. I'm pretty clear that transformation is sacrosanct in our country, that it's a non-negotiable in order for the country to achieve its aspirations, but most importantly, to live to the provisions of the BBBEE Act as it was articulated and envisaged. So we are not attempting to open a special dispensation for Starlink or any other company or an individual. We are saying that the regulations in our sector must consistently make provision for the two choices that exist in any other sector and other aspects of the ICT when it comes to the role of multinationals, whether small or big, that the provisions around the option of a 30% local ownership or the pathway of equity equivalence must be consistently available, or at least for the authority to consider the consistency of that of that option. So the ultimate intention is to ensure that the regulation is aligned with national empowerment regulations for licensing and potential new entrants.
That's where when you hear me say you must know. This is where I got more skeptical. That's where I got more skeptical. Firstly, the DA is a party that has campaigned multiple times on the basis of opposing BEE. There are three things the DA hates, and two of them have to do with cadre deployment and broad-based black economic empowerment. The last one is corruption, right? I think we all agree with them on corruption. Cadre deployment, they also do cadre deployment, by the way, but they've been saying, no, cadre deployment is ruining South Africa. You have to do cadre deployment, DA cadre deployment, right? Colleague assignment, right? CA, colleague assignment. So you can't do cadre deployment, you have to do colleague assignment. Colleague assignment. That is ethical. Send a colleague, Dean McPherson, you go be minister over there. And you, Solimalati, you go over there and you manage the matters of communications. And you, John Steinhazen, you go to agriculture, manage the matters of farms. And everywhere, you go and manage the matters of education, colleague assignment, not cadre deployment, not cadre. Anyway, you get what I'm trying to say. So they've been opposed to BEE ever since. But if you read their manifesto, you'll get all of that. Last year's manifesto, not even the one from, 2019, the 2024 manifesto. So this newfound respect for transformation and the support for an ANC-designed equity alternative, to me, seems very disingenuous. It seems to me insincere. And in fact, it seems to me to be a manipulation maneuver from the minister. The minister is very good at communications. He takes pride in being eloquent, in being somebody who is loquacious, somebody who has a proclivity for the Queen's tongue. And you have to give him credit for that. He is an excellent communicator. And in so doing, I think that's where the disingenuous behavior can come from, because he then oversells his commitment as a DA minister to transformation. I find that to be a stretch. Because how are you now, as a DA minister, fully supportive of BEE and transformation as the ANC has formulated it? Surely that can be. Or otherwise, you'd be a member of the ANC and not a member of the DA. If you fully believe in ANC equity alternatives and BEE, something your party has been campaigning robustly against, it seems to me that he was saying what the public and the committee wanted to hear, while still producing the outcome that his party wanted, which is the delivery of Starlink in South Africa. And in administrative law, right? Because I'm saying this, but it has legal basis as grounds for review. In administrative law, what this is called is an ulterior motive. It's called an ulterior motive. You state one purpose, but you have another purpose. And we must never forget, no matter how eloquent, no matter how sharp the suit, politicians are not necessarily the best people when it comes to word of mouth linking with intentions. Which is to say, they're not honest people. They are not honest people typically. Men lie, women lie, politicians lie, double. And Lauryn Hill has this line where she says, everyday people, they lie to God. And typically, when you're really sick or when something horrible is happening to your family, you pray and you'll say, God, relieve me from this particular thing. And I will never, then you insert drink again, smoke again, lie again, XYZ again. Then when that cloud passes over, most people, Back to that thing. That's what Lorne was talking about. That every day people, they lie to God. So what makes you think they won't lie to you? And politicians lie even more. Not saying that the minister is lying. I'm saying we must always take the words of a politician with the salt shaker, with the sweet chili, with all of the spices, because we got to take their word with a lot of skepticism. Minister, I know you're watching. I know you're watching. He watches a lot of the podcasts that are out there. I think he watches this one as well. We have never heard you support BEE in your party. And you say you agree with the views of your leader and the views of the party. So how can we believe you when you now say that you support BEE? Can you see why there's a gap in credibility over there? Can you see, Mr. Minister, Mr. Malatsi, why people are not necessarily going to take your version as being the truth and the truth and nothing else? How does that thing go? Tell the truth. What is that? What is that thing? I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. Can you see why we don't feel that this is an oath level statement from you? Anyway, let's go to what the committee said to the minister. They were very tough on the minister. They were not playing games. Overall, I think it's good that this is happening. I think it's good that Rupert mentioned Starlink in the White House, because nothing will erase that. That put everyone on notice. The richest man in South Africa, second richest in Africa, talking to the richest man in the world about his company coming to help South Africa, and offering him government opportunities, saying you can put it in police stations, etc., etc. That is something that can never be erased. No matter what Solly Malatsi says, no matter how eloquent he is, no matter how many words that he dictates or cites from a dictionary. He can say, this is one of the words that he used there is peremptory. I think I'm pronouncing it incorrectly even. Peremptory, which means it's not negotiable. When he was changing the legislation, is trying to say the act itself, the Electronic Communications Act, says you can do BE or this other thing. But then ICASA doesn't actually provide the other thing, which is the equity alternatives. And he's saying, well, it's peremptory, meaning it's not negotiable. I'm like, oh, those are big words. Those are big words, fam. Big words. But no matter how he tries to slice it, people still heard Rupert say what he said. We heard him with our own ears. We saw him with our own eyes in the Oval Office saying, Mr. Trump, Starlink police stations. We heard him, right? I think it's good it's happening this way. But what I think is even better is that Parliament has taken this action. Kusela Diko issued the invite. The minister came. Members of Parliament were able to give their views, and they were tough. I think it's good for democracy. I think everything that was happening up until this point was happening behind closed doors too much. It's good that it happens like this in front of the whole public so that everyone can measure. And then voters can decide later if they want Starlink, Neuralink, and all of the things. Elon has got sometimes very dark intentions. He wants to put chips in our brains, this guy. And if he's willing to squeeze South Africa like this just to get his satellites operating here, what will he do when it's time to put chips in our head? I'm not a fan of that idea. I don't want to lie to you. I'm not a fan of it at all. It just seems invasive, and it seems like something out of Black Mirror. I don't want any microchips close to my brain. And Elon believes in that. He wants that. And he's willing to impose his will on democratic nations. Ngenkani. Anyway, here's what the members of Parliament had to say.
Chair, sitting here as lawmakers, we are brought by voters who elect the parties that we represent based on hopes that our manifesto commitments present to them. Now, looking at the policy directives as presented by the Minister and the Department for Public Participation, I think that they sort of dilutes or undermine those particular hopes. Because I can just pose a simple question. Why not open the licensing applications without including equity equivalent? So I'm a bit worried that a minister from a GNU party will bring, in my view and in the view of the party that I represent, a policy directive that undermines that particular statement of the GNU. I'm sort of concerned, Chair, with the minister's remark that when he states that ICASA as a regulator cannot stop the minister from proceeding with policy directive. That is a loaded statement. In my view, even if ICASA is not comfortable with what the minister is trying to achieve, it means that he will simply ignore their recommendation. And that is concerning because one of the mandate of ICASA is to assist this government and this country to achieve constitutional values. And amongst them is the equality as well as social justice that I have mentioned, as were created by the unjust laws of the past.
This concerns the wealth of the land of South Africans. The Freedom Charter says very clearly that the people shall own the wealth of this land. An alternative equivalent to ownership speaks exactly against that principle. As Honorable Matafa has mentioned in our statement of intent, to which the Honorable Minister and his party are signatories to, that one of the goals is to promote social justice and equity in our land. And I think that is the cutting edge, that is the sore point. And we must not be naive to lose that point. As in my short stint as acting chair, I was challenged, the democracy of this country was challenged, and I stood by it. I will not be naive in this house to say that we cannot talk about this. So as a caucus of the ANC caucus in this portfolio committee, we're very, very clear. The African National Congress is clear. Our laws are sacrosanct. There is no backdoor to gaining entry. Anyone wanting to gain entry into this country, especially into the ICT sector, which is a sector that is most disadvantaged, as Honorable Matafa said, perhaps the most, must come to the front door. There is a 30% that is in place. Certainly, the African National Congress position remains, as Honorable Matafa has indicated. We will not support this policy directive. We will call for its withdrawal. I'd really like to ask, the EEIP that the minister is proposing, what is the history of the EEIPs that have been in place thus far? And how have they benefited the people of our country tangibly, especially in terms of transformative agenda? Chairperson, another area that I wish to raise with the Honorable Chairperson is that he is considering that Section 9(2)(b) of the ECA clearly mandates a 30% HDG ownership for licensing. What is the legal justification for your policy, Mr. Minister, for your policy directive that aims to bypass this requirement, that equity equivalent programs which fall under a separate legislative framework? Are you not essentially trying to reshape the laws through unilateral action, thereby diminishing the authority of Parliament?
My concern is that it seems like the minister is trying to amend legislation using a ministerial policy directive. And I'll tell you why. Because you use the word alignment, and I think you do it deliberately instead of amendment. So I think you're trying to effect amendments using a ministerial policy directive to the Electronic Communications Act as well as to the ICT Sector Code, which is a product of the PPPE Act. Because in your policy directive communication, you say that you seek to align the two. I'm interested as to what would the consequence of that alignment look like? How do you achieve alignment? outside of changing legislation, because the ICT sector code, as much as it might be a regulatory instrument under the Department of Communications, it's a product of the PBBE Act. And to give a ministerial directive on the ICT sector code, which belongs to that specific act, which is regulated by the Department of Trade and Industry, confuses me. On the Electronic Communications Act, which speaks to the 30% ownership as well, I would imagine that an amendment of that or an alignment of that with the ICT sector code would require some level of amendment to either both pieces of legislation or one. One doesn't belong to the Department of Communications. It's a product of an act of the Department of Trade and Industry. The other is an act of Parliament. When you want to achieve this alignment, how do you seek to achieve it using a ministerial policy directive? And I think that speaks to the overstepping of powers or overstepping of executive powers that has been spoken to in the House. That is my primary legislative concern. But also conversely, I mean, we're talking about Starlink here. I don't think we should tiptoe around it. We're talking about Starlink. There might be many other foreign satellite companies that have interest in operating in South Africa, but there's a specific interest in Starlink, and I think Siklo will speak to the political context about that as well. But I'm interested in, has there any been consideration of the impact the introduction of foreign satellite companies operating in South Africa would have on the local telecommunications industry, specifically as it relates to jobs? Because there's a myth going around here that the introduction of Starlink will achieve two things, that it will achieve rural access to internet connectivity and as well will increase jobs. How will a satellite that will operate and be ran remotely from another country impact on the local telecommunications sector's jobs? And considering especially the high unemployment rate in this country. But secondly, what is the knowledge of the department on the costs related to the introduction of foreign satellite operators? Will it necessarily bring higher connectivity levels to rural communities? Will it be cheaper? Comparative to what? And has there been any consideration of the other spheres within which Starlink operates and the regulatory frameworks in the other countries that they operate in, whether they abided by them as set in stone? Because we're aware that they are operating in India with much stricter ownership, regulatory existence in terms of local ownership there. We know there's been a challenge in Taiwan, in Japan. Why are we altering our legislation for Starlink, whereas where it goes to operate in other countries, it did not utilize this coercion for us to change our laws in order for it to operate in South Africa? So I'm interested in the legislative aspect of it, and I think we'll talk further after we get clarity on that. Thank you, Chair.
Minister, you are at pains to explain the inexplainable in our view. The clandestine unilateral approach that you took in providing this policy directive is for us very bizarre and very abnormal. This is supposed to be a transparent process according to Section 9 of our Constitution. The public should be aware of it, there should be engagement, and the institutions, at least that you preside over, should be aware of this process. Now, Minister, when you do a policy directive, you're supposed to do a detailed consultative stakeholder engagement. We have not seen that. We've mentioned that even in our letter to you. We're supposed to see your regulatory impact assessment that you would have conducted that would lead you to do this policy directive. We have not seen that. Our letter as MK Party was very clear. There is no multinational that will evade the BBBE Act of ownership, control, and management, the 30% as provided by the Act. As I draw to close now, Minister, it's a pity that we can't directly put a motion of no confidence on you as MPs and as a party, because you have delegated authority, you are appointed by the president. But in the light of that, these are my 4 questions to you. Why should we keep you as a minister of DCDT? When are you reversing this unlawful gazette? Who pressured you to do this? You are under oath. Who pressured you? Who instructed you to do this? Because you seem like an intelligent man. Maybe in the words of Rupert, you seem like a changed man. Who is pressuring you to do this? Tell us who in your department, the departments that you oversee, advised you to do this gazette, because we want to know them. Because those are the incompetent people that after we release you, we need to go after them as well. Finally, again, Mr. Minister, when can we expect your resignation letter? I thank you.
Yeah. If Elon Musk thought it was going to be easy, ANC is not happy with this. The Umkhonto weSizwe is not happy with this. Bakwaza this thing. The fighters are fighting this thing, and the fighters will fight this thing because they were big plays. The music videos that Trump played, they were fighters, and also Jacob Zuma. It was Julius Malema and Jacob Zuma there that were played. So MK and EFF, you can forget about them. But it looks like ANC in the committee is not coming to the party. There's no one left. There was just one DA voice there trying to defend the minister, but in the main, the parties are not coming to this. So if they don't have the ANC, if they don't have EFF, they don't have they're not going to be able to push this through. It's not going to work. And I don't think the public wants this anyway. Elon Musk has been acting in a very, very unethical manner to get what he wants. He got funding cancelled, right? USAID, PEPFAR, all of these had funding channels to South Africa for AIDS relief. People are foreseeably going to die because of loss of this funding. Then he had that executive order that was targeting South Africa. That was also passed. Bad things are happening in South Africa. He had Trump repeating all of these things. Of course, Trump makes his own mind up, but Elon is very influential in Trump circles, and Trump trusts him on these issues of South Africa. Trump trusts him. Trump hasn't been to Africa. He doesn't know anything about South Africa. He relies on Elon Musk for his information. Now, after doing all of this for him to be rewarded with his company operating, when he can still cut that, he cut Starlink in Ukraine. He's made funny moves with the companies that he owns. Look at what has been happening with Grok. He manipulated Grok. All of this shows that there's a pattern of behavior which is unethical. Starlink may be a good idea and a good company if it wasn't attached to Elon Musk. But because of the nature of the company, internet provision, because of the kind of power that can give to somebody if he gets a monopoly, and he will try to get a monopoly, get 30 to 40% of the country using that, and he may very well be able to do that. Then what happens if he then decides that no, he doesn't want you to see a particular website because it wrote a negative article about him? What's to stop him from blocking the access to that website? He's been fighting with the government in Brazil. Elon is willing to do things which are questionable to get his way. And for me, that's something that I think is a concern. And I hope people participate in that public process that the minister is trying to get going so that they can articulate their objection to this. Because I don't think that Elon is a trustworthy guy. And I don't think he should be rewarded for his tactics. He basically attacked South Africa to do business in South Africa. If you think there's a crisis happening in South Africa so much, why do you want to operate your business in South Africa? Isn't there like a genocide? Aren't horrible things happening? So why do you want to bring Starlink? It doesn't make sense from his end of the equation. But of course, they know that they've been lying. They know that they've been manipulating what has been happening with crime in South Africa to coerce the South African government to a position where they allow Starlink to operate in South Africa. And it's not pennies, by the way. I've seen some people say, no, South Africa doesn't have money. It's not small pennies. South Africa is the second or largest economy, depending on how you measure, in Africa. 63 million people. 50% of those people are using the internet right now as we speak. There are many people who are employed, gainfully employed. There are various opportunities here. This is why all of these multinationals are operating in South Africa. Google, Apple, Amazon. This is not a small market. You know, sometimes if people are trying to trick you or take advantage of you, they'll try to convince you that you've got no value. This is what abusive men do. They'll tell women that they're not beautiful when they know that the woman is a 10. And they'll say, no, you're all right. You're all right. And then if they crack that lady's confidence, then Mbungulu will be in there. And everyone will be looking and saying, why the hell is he with her? There's two reasons why you can see a man who is not matching a 10 with her. One, he's a blesser. He is a blesser, tenderpreneur. So he has Hosh Karimaimat himself. You were wondering how the Hosh Karimaimat is going to come in. That's how. So that's one of the ways that someone will be, there'll be a mismatch. There'll be a mismatch. Mbungulu, Hoshkar Maima. Then that's a tenderpreneur. That's a friend of Saudi. That's a Hoshkari father there. Yellow bones with the yellow thighs. That man. The other way is this manipulation tactic where they convince that person that she's not attractive, etc., etc. Gaslighting, abuse type of tactics. This is what they're trying to do. Jokes aside, that's what they're trying to do. Tell South Africa that, no, you've got no value as a market. Don't worry. We don't even care. It's pennies. We don't even care. Just give us that Starlink contract. Give us a But Elon is the richest man in the world. What does he care about South Africa? What does he care about Starlink operating in South Africa? You think that guy is doing this for charity? He knows that business is going to be a bigger business than Tesla even. And if he controls the global access to internet, satellite internet, all of the airlines, all of these cars that are even needing to connect to the internet, that's all going to be him. Whether or not you buy a Tesla, he's getting that revenue. He knows the size of that business. It's not a joke business. He knows the size of the South African market better than most people. That's why his family built their wealth. He understands. So don't come here with this argument that, no, South Africa is a small, insignificant market. South Africa is one of the most important markets and one that continues to grow. And Elon Musk knows this. Rupert knows this. All of the Rupert wealth is built on South African soil. All of that alcohol, all of those cigarettes that were sold to build the empire, F&B, all of that banking. It's not just an international funding. It's South African transactions that have built Capitec, Betway, all of these companies. But they try to make it seem when they're avoiding accountability or regulation that, small country, we can go anytime. Where are you going to go? You're going to go to Togo. Where are you going to go? No disrespect to Togo. I'm just saying economies are not the same size. So don't buy this narrative, is all I'm saying. What do you think? Let's have a conversation in the comments till the next one. I'm in the comments now. Let's go. What do you think?